be recording now. Okay, excellent. And let me share the screen. Share screen, yes. Okay, so do you see my screen? Open journal. Do you see that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, excellent. All right, so I guess this is tutorial 9, right? Okay, and now you were saying that you want me to discuss some problems from the practice problem session. Let me just open that over here, right? This is the practice problem set. So you're saying question number 4, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So the first one, is that okay? Find the interior of open 0, closed 1.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. About part 2, the interior of a set is always open.
Yes, ma'am.
That,
From part 4.
part 4, okay. Show that E interior is the largest open subset of E that is contained in E. Yeah, so let's try. Yeah, so this is tutorial 9. Question number, what did you say? Question number, is it 4? Question number 4, part 4, sorry. Yeah. Question number 4, part 4 from practice problem set. So the question says that given a metric space Xt, E is a subset of X, show that E interior is the largest open set, rather subset of E that is contained in E. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? Okay. So let's sort of unwind and try to understand what is this question saying. So this is saying the one part is that E interior is open, subset of E, that we have already done in parts 1, 2, and 3. So this is saying let F be an open subset of E. Yeah. Then F is contained in E interior. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So how do we? Any suggestions? Somebody would like to suggest something? See, I'm waiting for somebody to help me out. This is, I'll drop another hint. Yeah, this is one way to go about it. Other way is to show that, yeah, so I'll drop another hint. Show that, sorry, this is rather sloppy. Show that E interior is the union of all open sets that are contained in E. Yeah. See, in order to solve question number 4, part 4, it is enough to show that the interior of a set E is the union of all open subsets of E. Yeah. So, Kritika, are you with me up till this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So, how would one show something like this? What thought goes behind this is arbitrary union of open sets is open, right? That is something to be remembered here. So, how would you show something like this?
Ma'am, that open set is clear, means it goes from the
Correct.
definition of open
Correct.
set.
Correct. 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 So let's write that down. So let's set, so let's consider union of F over the set F subset of E, F open in E. Yeah, you take this union and call this set something. Yeah, call this set S. Yeah, so you are required to show that E interior is this set script S. Correct? Now, one way inclusion is follows from the definition. Which way? E interior itself is an open subset of E, right? Isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, E interior is an open, I'll say, since E interior is an open subset of E, what does that imply?
E interior is a subset of S.
E interior is contained in S, correct? Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So how do we show the other way around? For the other way around, so conversely, let F be an open subset of E. Yeah, this is what I wrote down first. Show that F is contained in what? So if F is an open subset of E, so I'm starting with an element of script S here, yeah, starting with an element here. Show that F is contained in the interior of E. Is that correct? Is that what you are all required to show here? Everybody
Yes,
with me
ma'am.
up till this point? Yeah. So, this is exactly the point that I first wrote down. But anyways, there's no harm in doing it one more time. So how would you show something like this? So you start with an element of X, F, no? So let X belongs to F, right? Now, So by definition, F is an open subset of E, right? So which means that F contains a neighborhood of the point X, right? So there exists some R positive such that a neighborhood of the point X, so I'm considering an R neighborhood. So X belongs to this. This is contained in F. Yeah, this is using the fact that F is open in E. Correct? Yes. Now, what does it tell you?
Ma'am, that it will also be there in S because it is the union.
Yes, and that's it. That we are done, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes. See, all you have to do is write down the definition here carefully. Correct? Is that okay, Kritika?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Can I sort of leave this for you to sort of complete the argument here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Is that okay? All right. Very nice. Okay. So let me see how many of you are here today. Okay, so we have 8 of you here. So anybody else has any other question, comment?
Ma'am,
Yes, please.
ma'am, the last theorem that you did, that
Okay.
AB is compact in the Euclidean metric.
Correct, correct. Yeah, we are still not done, but yeah, go ahead. You can still ask the question. Yes, please.
Ma'am, can you just open that page? Means while
Okay.
writing the interview.
Okay. So here it is. Oh, I don't seem to have that. Just a minute. Give me a minute. Let me just pull that out. Um, so that was the last lecture, no? So which means lecture 17 it was?
Yes, ma'am, I think.
Yes. Give me a minute.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, tell me.
The
Yeah, so we
previous
are
page.
still not done with the theorem. Yeah. Yeah, please tell
The
me.
previous page.
Okay.
Ma'am,
Yes.
this should be means when we are constructing the second part, at least one of the intervals A1,
Hmm.
A1 plus B1 by 2, or
Hmm.
that would be B1, right? Instead of A2.
Uh, so let's see. Yeah, that will be B1 here. That's you are correct. Yeah, you're right. So let me try to enumerate this. Yeah, you're right. So just a minute. I'll just that'll be 8. So I am considering sub intervals of A1 B1 here. So this will be B1. You are right. So let me open this file with journal. Annotate PDF. Save. So maybe I'll do that correction. Yeah. Or yeah. Or let's see if I can do that right now. Yeah. Thank you so much for pointing this out. Over here, right? So let me try if this works. So as Raika, right? You pointed it out. This should be B1. Correct. Yes. Yeah, that's the notation that we are using here. So one of them fails to have a finite subcover, and we are going to the one which fails to have finite subcover as I2. Correct.
And ma'am,
Tell me.
ma'am, can you explain that part where the theorem on finite intersection property?
Okay.
Why K alpha naught belongs to the union of.
Just a minute. This
Yes, ma'am.
one.
Yes, ma'am.
So let K alpha be a collection of compact sets with the finite intersection property. Then if you take the intersection of all of those K alphas, that has to be non-empty. There is one point which is common to all of these K alphas. So are you asking me? Is that? Is that correct, Raika? You are asking about this theorem?
Your voice was breaking. I couldn't hear it.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So now can you hear me clearly?
Yes, ma'am.
So you're asking about this theorem, which you see on your screen?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So let's try to run through the proof. So everybody remembers the finite intersection property? Yeah. So let's just quickly recall that. When do we say a collection of sets have a finite intersection property? So let's consider G alphas here, where alpha runs over some indexing set I. Now this set I may be infinite, I don't know. Yeah. So what the finite intersection property says is, if I take any finitely many G alphas, then that intersection is always non-empty, no matter what this finite subset F is of the indexing set I. Yeah. If and when that happens, we say that this collection of sets G alphas have finite intersection property. Correct? Okay, so this was just an example to highlight the finite intersection property. So what I was trying to say is that if you consider GNs as open intervals 0n, where little n varies over the set of natural numbers, then these GNs do have the finite intersection property. However, there is no point which is common to all of these GNs. Yeah. So what is that we want to understand here, that if a collection of sets has finite intersection property, that does not guarantee that the intersection of GNs over all of n's, all of the indexing set I, has to be non-empty. Yeah. But however, if each GN was compact, then this cannot happen. This is what this is what this theorem is saying. This is saying, let K alpha be a collection of compact sets with finite intersection property. Then the intersection of K alphas over the entire indexing set I is non-empty, which means that there is one element which is common to all of these K alphas. Correct? You have seen an example of this theorem. I'll try to point it out, but let's run through the proof first. So let's fix an element K alpha naught of K alpha. So we are sort of working under the contradiction. Yeah. Suppose that the intersection of K alpha over all alphas, all alpha in I is empty, right? So let's fix some arbitrary element K alpha naught. So suppose no point of K alpha naught belongs to every K alpha. See, if we are in the scenario that there is a point of K alpha naught which belongs to every K alpha, then that point would be in the intersection and we are done. Correct? So now we are looking at the, yes, please. Yeah.
Ma'am, we are assuming that it is empty.
No. So let me just run through it one more time. So fix an element K alpha naught of K alphas. Yeah. Some element K alpha naught from this collection. So suppose that there is a point, so what is that I have written here? Suppose that no point of K alpha naught belongs to every K alpha. So this is the supposition. So there are two cases here. Suppose that there is a point of K alpha naught that belongs to every K alpha. Let me write that down in green if that is allowed here. Yeah. So if there is a point of K alpha naught that belongs to every K alpha. Yeah. So do you see this green ink at your screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So if there is a point of K alpha naught that belongs to every K alpha, then that point would be in the intersection of this collection, correct? So we are done. Yes. So then we are done. I'll just write that here. So let's look at the other scenario, that there is no point of k alpha naught that belongs to every k alpha. Correct?
Yes.
Is that okay? Yes. Okay. So I've written something in red ink here. I'm reading that. So that means that if x is a point in k alpha naught, then x does not belong to every k alpha. Sorry, let me say that again. I made a mistake here. So if x is a point in k alpha naught, then so x belongs to every k alpha. That is not true, which means that there is some alpha different from alpha naught such that x does not belong to k alpha. That's correct. Is that okay, Raika? Are you with me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So now let's look at the complements of k alpha. I'm calling them the sets g alpha, right? Now the claim is that under this supposition, these sets g alpha. So I'm leaving the indexing set. So I'm considering all the elements here, but alpha different from alpha naught. Why is that? We will also look at that. So G alphas form an open cover of K alpha naught. You know, G alpha naught is the complement of K alpha naught. So there is no way G alpha naught can be in the open cover of K alpha naught, right? But K alpha naught is contained in the union of G alphas for all alphas distinct from alpha naught. Is this inclusion clear? You know, this follows directly from what is written in red ink here, that if you have an element of K alpha naught, then x does not belong to k alpha for some alpha different from alpha naught is exactly saying that x belongs to g alpha. Yeah, so the complement of k alpha is g alpha for some alpha different from alpha naught. Correct? So this says that this inclusion is true, and the fact that each of these g alphas is open follows from the fact that k alpha by assumption is compact, which means that in particular k alphas are closed sets. So the complements of k alpha are open. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So now you appeal to the compactness of k alpha naught to extract a finite subcover, which gives you a finitely many indices alpha 1 up to alpha k, such that k alpha naught is contained in this union g alpha 1, g alpha 2, g alpha k. Remember, all of these alpha 1, alpha 2, alpha k, each of them is different from alpha naught, right? So, you know, I'm just rewriting the above inclusion in one more time, recalling the fact that each of these G alphas are complements of K alphas. So if K alpha naught is contained in this inclusion, that would imply that K alpha naught intersected with K alpha 1, K alpha 2, K alpha K, that is an empty set. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, but this cannot happen because we assume that if you take the intersection of any finitely many of these k alphas, that has to be non-empty. Yeah, that is courtesy the finite intersection property. Correct?
Okay, ma'am.
Yes. So you know, I think this is a good opportunity to point this out. You know, you remember there is one nested interval theorem which was handed out as a reading assignment to you.
Yes.
Yes, so I think it was some chapter 2 or something of this book. You know, so that nested interval theorem is a very particular example of this this theorem that is listed here. So I think this is at least in the version of Bartley and Shepard that I have. This is theorem 2.5.2. I'll just maybe write that down here. Since we are discussing it here. So once we have understood that closed and bounded intervals are compact sets in the Euclidean metric, then this would follow. If In is equal to an bn n in n is, so I'm just sort of producing this theorem from this book here for your reference, is a nested sequence of closed and bounded intervals then there exists a number zeta so I've written it xi here, doesn't matter. So a number xi in R such that xi belongs to In for all n. See, this corollary follows from this theorem, provided we have already established the fact that each interval, so I will not say it's a corollary here, I'll just say recall. We have still not proved this theorem. Do you all remember having seen this nested intervals property?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. See, the fact that it is a nested sequence will make sure that so this collection of intervals, INs, have the finite intersection property. Correct? Yeah. In fact, in order to prove that closed and bounded intervals are compact, I am going to appeal to this nested intervals property today afternoon. Yeah. Yeah. So all I wanted to sort of highlight here, I want to just bring this to your attention that you've already seen an example of a collection of sets having finite intersection property with the same conclusion. Is that okay? Is that okay, Raika?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, excellent. Yeah. Anything else?
Ma'am, in
Yes,
this
please.
theorem only, can you once again repeat why that G alpha forms an open cover of K alpha?
Yeah, just a minute, Kritika. So you are saying that this time, yeah, why do G alphas form an open cover of K alpha naught?
Yes,
Correct?
yes.
Yes. So the first thing to notice that why are G alphas open? Yeah, that is because each K alpha is given to be a compact set, and we did a theorem which says that in a metric space, every compact set is necessarily closed, which will imply that K alpha is closed, which will imply that the complement of K alpha, that is the set G alpha, is open. That's the first observation. Correct? Is that okay? Yes. Now comes the second part, which means that the statement, yeah, why is K alpha not contained in this union here, right? So if you start with an element X of K alpha naught, yeah, then what is that we have shown? We are under the assumption that no point of K alpha naught belongs to every K alpha, right? So X does not belong to every K alpha, yeah, which means that there is some alpha to which X does not belong, yeah. So there is some alpha such that X does not belong to that corresponding K alpha, yeah, which means that I've written this in red ink here. If X is in K alpha naught, then X does not belong to K alpha for some alpha different from alpha naught. Correct?
Yes.
Is that okay? So saying that X does not belong to K alpha means X belongs to the complement of K alpha. Now, complement of K alpha is what I have written as G alpha. So, it exactly means that if X belongs to K alpha naught, then X belongs to G alpha for some alpha different from alpha naught. Yeah. So let's go back here. So if X belongs to K alpha naught, it means that X belongs to G alpha for some alpha different from alpha naught, which means that X is contained in this union, which is written on the right hand side. And X to start off was any arbitrary element of X K alpha naught. So this inclusion holds true.
Yes, ma'am. It's okay.
If you still have doubts, please ask. Don't hesitate.
No, ma'am,
If there
it's
is a
okay.
sticky point still, please ask.
No, ma'am, it's okay. I got it.
It's okay. All right. Is this good with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. So anything else? Any other comments, suggestions, questions?
Ma'am?
Yes, please.
Ma'am, the quiz that we had given,
Correct.
will that be graded?
Yeah, I am still grading it. Yeah, I apologize.
No, because we cannot find it in Moodle.
No. See, I have hidden it because I am, grading it. Half the students, the grading is done, and half the students, it's not done. So just hidden it from students from now. Once it is done, I will open it for everybody.
We thought that it wouldn't be graded, so it has
No,
been.
see, because otherwise some of you become very anxious that your quiz has not been graded, but your friends has been graded. So
Okay.
that's the reason I have hidden it. Yeah, I apologize. I have not been able to finish the grading, but hopefully by this weekend I'll finish. Yeah.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah, my sincere apologies. Yeah. Okay, so seems like there are no further questions. So what do you want to do now? We still have some 15-20 minutes.
Ma'am?
Yes, please.
Ma'am, there was this MCQ in mid-sim.
Yes, tell me.
That it was given that, 1 second, I have to open Moodle. Yes, ma'am. It was given that modulus of xn minus xn plus 1 is less than 1 by n. So which
Just,
of the...
let me just write it down. I don't remember it on top of my head. Give me a minute. So I'll just close this to save. And so I'll just write it down for the benefit of everybody so that all of us are on the same page. Open desktop. Yeah, sorry, this is taking time. Page end. So somewhere in the middle of discussion, there should be 2 here. Here it is. So I'll just write down whatever you're saying. Yeah, so there's a question. Tell me.
xn is a sequence of real numbers such that modulus of xn minus xn plus 1 is less than 1 by n for each n belong to natural number.
Okay. Correct.
So it was given that which of the following statements is true.
Okay. So which of the following statements is true? Yeah, let me write down all. Yeah, tell me.
None of the other three.
Okay. All right.
xn is bounded.
Yes. Correct.
xn is convergent.
Yes.
And xn is Cauchy.
Sequence xn is Cauchy. Okay. All right. Yeah, tell me.
I was that
but not convergent, right? So I am curious, how did you show that it is not Cauchy? I'm just curious, you know, I'm not testing you here. I'm just curious.
No, ma'am. If I take xm minus xn,
XM, okay.
Where m is less than n.
Okay. All right.
Then that would be less than equal to xm minus xm plus 1.
Yes.
And so if we move till
X, yeah, is that correct? What I am
yes,
writing? Yeah, you apply the triangle inequality
yes.
recursively till you reach the point n minus 1 minus n. Okay.
So each of them
Huh.
that would be 1 by m.
Yes. The first one would be 1 by m. The next one would be 1 by m plus 1. The last one would be 1 upon, what is it? 1 upon n minus 1. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
So 1 by m is greater than all of them.
So you are saying that m is smaller than n, so 1 by m is bigger than 1 by n. Is that what you're using?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so all right. So then what do you do?
So I replace them by 1 by m.
1 by m.
Yes.
Okay, so you're saying this is 1. So there's a strict inequality here right now.
Yes, ma'am.
Just a minute. So 1 by m plus 1 by m plus 1 by m. Okay.
So that is, I guess, m minus n by m.
Okay. So you're saying that is perhaps equal to m minus n by n. Okay.
M minus n by m.
Oh, by n. Sorry, there's no n here. Correct. Yes. Okay.
I'm m minus n.
M minus n. Yeah. Sorry again. Yeah. Is that correct? M
Yes,
minus
ma'am.
n
So
by n.
this will not converge. Right.
See, this is.
If m and
Huh. Okay, so Raika, there are two things here. You seem to be exploring what is given here, but this certainly does not give you a proof that xn is not Cauchy. See, this just gives you a bound, but there might be a finer bound for which it may work out to be Cauchy. Yeah, this is one thing I would like to highlight. Right? Is that okay? Do you see my point here?
okay.
Yes. Yeah, but you are trying to explore what is happening to the question. You know, so you know this your sort of analysis here should actually hint you to something like this. You know, you're looking at 1 by m's. You know, so let's try some examples. You know, do you know something, some sequence which would satisfy this condition here that xn minus xn plus 1 is strictly less than 1 by n? So let me see. What comes to my mind is the following. So xn as summation 1 by k equal to 1 to n. So if it is 1 plus 1 by 2 plus 1 by n, what is that is given? And xn plus 1 would be summation k equal to 1 to n plus 1, 1 by k. So what would be xn minus xn plus 1? So that would be 1 upon n plus 1, right?
Yes, ma'am.
That would be less than this. Is that correct? And
Yes.
this would be true for each n. So for this, for each n. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Now, so this is just one example that fits in here, right? Nothing else is given, right? It's a real sequence and satisfies the inequality. Now, what can you say about the sequence xn here? Is it Cauchy? Is it bounded? Is it convergent?
None of them.
None of them, right? Is that
Yes.
correct? Yeah.
Yes.
So this is just one example that occurred to me looking at your analysis, right? But maybe there will be many more that fit in here. Yeah, and you know, this sort of comes in when we consider this infinite series summation 1 by n. This is exactly the sequence of partial sums of that series, and that's what we look at. Yeah, is that okay, Raika?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. Anything else? Okay, so if there's nothing else, you know, let's do this question here. Yeah, there's one small question. I think it's a good idea to discuss it here. So let K be a subset of R. It's in the spirit of what we have been discussing. Then show that K is compact. So this applies only for, you know, when I say K subset of R without mentioning the metric, this means the Euclidean metric on R. Show that K is compact if and only if every sequence in K has a subsequence that converges to a point of K. So in fact, you know, I would sort of erase it as a theorem. You know, this is the compactness, description of compactness in terms of sequences, right? So there's a name actually to this. This is called a sequential compactness. So, but I believe everybody understands what is it trying to say. K is compact in K subset of R is compact if and only if every sequence in K has a subsequence that converges to a point of K. Now, one must wonder, right? The definition of compact set that we started off says that you know, K is compact if every open cover of K admits a finite subcover, right? Now, where sequences come, trying to compact, you know, so as we will see a little bit later, this is also quite natural, I would say, but I think I would be able to do that maybe in the class today. But this is a separate observation which we can, which I thought that maybe since we are discussing sequences might be a good idea. Yeah, but is everybody with me? Everybody understands what is the statement trying to say? You pick a sequence xn in K. If it has a subsequence that converges to a point in K, and if this happens for every sequence in K, then we say that K is compact. Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So one way should be routine. Which way? I think let's just quickly fill in a proof to this. So I say that the forward implication is much easier, that if K is compact, then every sequence in K has a convergent subsequence converging to a point of K. Does everybody see that?
Yes.
The forward part, let's just quickly see. Let K be a subset of R and be compact, right? That's the assumption to start off with. And what do? Let's pick a subsequence, a sequence in K, sequence of points of K. We are required to show that it has a subsequence that converges to a point of K. How do we do this? Somebody would like to help me out here?
Ma'am, since K is compact.
Yes.
So it is bounded.
Correct.
Xn is bounded.
Xn is bounded, and then?
Every subsequence of Xn will also be bounded.
Correct.
So then by Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem, every
bounded sequence has a convergence subsequence. Yeah. And then what do we say? How do we say that limit of that subsequence would actually belong to the point K and not outside K? Some more work here, but Raika, I will still write down whatever you are saying. Let me just finish that for the benefit of everybody. Since K is compact, so bounded. So in particular, this implies that the sequence Xn is bounded. So you appeal to the Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem. It follows from the Bolzano-Weierstrass theorem that every bounded sequence has a convergent subsequence. So in particular, the sequence Xn has a convergent subsequence, as a convergent subsequence. So I'm going to write it by, let's say, the name Xnk. Right? Now we demand something more, right? We demand that this subsequence Xnk is to a point K. Yeah. So let's call the limit as x naught as K tends to infinity. How do we assert that x naught does not spill out of K? How do we show that x naught belongs to K?
K is closed.
K is closed.
You use the fact that K is closed. Excellent. Yeah. So again, since K is compact, it follows that K is closed, and hence the limit of this subsequence Xnk of points in K has to belong to K. It follows that x naught belongs to K. Excellent. Yeah. So this takes care of one part of it. So let's just quickly finish the other part. So or maybe I'll sort of leave it for you to think about it. If so, let K be a subset of R such that every sequence in K has sequence converging to a point of K. Yeah. We need to show that K is compact. Yeah. Is that correct? Everybody with me up till this point?
Yes, ma'am.
So how do we proceed from this point? Something to think about here. Yeah.
From the statement, we can say that since every sequence sequence in K has a subsequence converging to K, then we have a theorem which says that the sequence is converging to K, and since K will, we'll have the sequence
See,
converging to the
Kritika, I lost you here. Why would the sequence xn itself converge to K? Sorry, what is that I want to say? So you're saying that if every sequence xn in K has a subsequence converging to a point of K, then the sequence itself will converge to that point. Why should that happen?
No, ma'am, I got a bit mixed up. Means like every subsequence has converging to a point in K, and that point will belong to K.
Yes.
So from there we can say that K contains its limit points.
Okay, so you're trying to say that K is closed.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, that seems like a good starting point. Yeah. So what Kritika is trying to say is that we use this analysis to say that K is closed. Yeah. So Kritika, you are right, but it will be sort of the argument will be a little more straightforward if you argue like this. Yeah. So you say that we claim that K is closed. If K is not closed, then there would be some limit point of K which is outside K, and you sort of argue like that. Yes, is that okay? But you are right. You are on the right track. Is that correct? It's the same argument, but it's sort of much neater if you argue like this. Correct?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Okay. So that would that would tell us something about if K is closed. Yeah. Okay. I would suggest is please think about it, and we will sort of answer this question at 2 p.m. today. Well, maybe not at 2, but maybe at 2:30 p.m. or so. Yeah, there's a little gap here which we need to fill in, for which we need some more understanding of compact sets is what I'll try to I would sort of say. Is that okay? Yeah. So please think about it, and we will sort of fill in the argument at in the session at today afternoon. All right. So maybe I'll just stop the recording.